We're back. We're going to go say good morning here to Mr. Brad Cabana. Hi, Brad.
Good morning, Randy. How are you?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. Just calling this morning. I listened to Finance Minister Marshall this morning discussing Muskrat Falls.
Yes.
And, I can't, I have to almost disagree with just about everything he said. It sounds to me like he's really speaking government talking points, but he's not stopping to do the math.
Well, I would think that he would be speaking government talking points because he's the government.
Well, yeah, I give you that. But
now, what are you saying? He's not. What's wrong with his math?
Well, first off, yesterday afternoon, Jerome Kennedy was on the VOCM talk and said that the mines have indicated they're going to need approximately between 500 to 1,000 megawatts of power in Labrador.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. So Muskrat Falls only produces 850 megawatts,
mm-hmm.
of which 220 are going to be going to Nova Scotia in the first 5 years, and then 170 after that. Okay?
Right. Okay.
So Holyrood is, 500 megawatts?
Something like that.
Okay, so he's talking about replacing Holyrood. So you're taking out 500 megawatts, and then you're giving Nova Scotia 200. That's 700 megawatts you need to replace right there. Now, what about Labrador? What about the mines, the 500 to 1,000 megawatts that Minister Kennedy admitted to yesterday afternoon that the mines have indicated that they will potentially need?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You see how this just doesn't jive. You can't replace Holyrood, send power to Nova Scotia, power the mines with one little Muskrat Falls project. I know it's the Holy Grail, but it's only 850 megawatts.
Well, it's 824 actually. And there's an argument that says due to line loss and other things that attach to it, the actual amount of power that will be generated that can be used will hover somewhere around 570 to 600 megawatts. I don't know how true that is. I don't know how true that is.
Well, I agree with that, and also, there's studies on that, on converting. That type of line loses its power at the conversion state, not underwater.
Mm-hmm.
So when it converts from AC to DC, at each shoreline, it loses anywhere from 5 to 7%. That's what the studies show anyway.
Mm-hmm. So there really isn't 824 megawatts of power in total. But the question the question that begs an answer in all of this, which doesn't seem to be wrong in what the minister said, is that they're recognizing, for one thing, Nova Scotia does not get the power for free. Nova Scotia pays for the line and gives us the line. So they're paying in advance as opposed to paying for free. So wouldn't we accept that piece of the argument? Say, yes, okay, I see that.
No, because first of all, we're going to be paying any power we send through the Nova Scotia line, we're going to be paying a tariff on it, a transmission fee. Okay?
I don't think that's right. I think you're wrong on that.
No, I know I'm not wrong on that. You should check that out. There's a transmission fee for any power we send to sell into the U.S. or New Brunswick or wherever else. There's a transmission fee.
Right. Yeah. Oh, no. I appreciate that. But the power that Nova Scotia is taking.
Yes. No, they don't pay on that.
That's what I'm saying. There's no transmission fees of any kind attached to that. But can't we argue or see the logic of the argument that says we're going to give you 35 years worth of this power valued at $1.6 billion, and what you're going to do is build a line and pay for it up front, and we're going to give you the power for that. What's wrong with that as a deal?
As a deal, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. That's a judgment call on whether or not you have that kind of megawattage to spare, whether that market's worth it, et cetera, et cetera. But I guess my point to you, Randy, is that when Minister Marshall comes on and says we're going to replace Holyrood, even though, okay, the Manitoba Hydro study showed that with the isolated island versus the Labrador link, that actually building Muskrat Falls and the associated power plants that go with it, that thermal generation is actually going to increase by 2%. So we're actually going to be polluting more with the Muskrat Falls project and the assorted power plants that go with it over the next 60 years. And I don't hear any of them talking about that. They talk about replacing Holyrood, but the reality
I don't hear anybody saying that.
Well, if you read the Manitoba Hydro study, it says there it's going to be, I believe it's a 2% overall increase, actually, in thermal generation. by the time all these little small plants are built, by the year 2060 or 2067, there's going to be 2% increase in thermal generation. So you may want to ask the minister about that next time you speak to him, but that's in the Manitoba Hydro report. The other thing that's in that report, Randy, is that the conversion stations are actually brand new technology. They have never been, these particular transmission stations, conversion stations, I should say, have never been built in the world yet. Just so you know. Yeah,
but the technology they're going to use in transferring energy underwater is not new technology. They're not breaking new ground. Let me put it to you this way. It's not nearly as dramatic a technological innovation as what's happening, for example, in Long Harbor, where they spent $2 billion on generating a hydromet process for nickel plating that didn't exist before, and now they've commercialized it and they're building the plant out there. That's a huge technological jump. What they're going to do here is not technologically nearly that significant.
I will just add to the one point, though, Randy, that the conversion stations in this type of system is where you lose all the power that you're going to lose.
That's right. There's a recognition that there's going to be some power lost as you send it down the line. So one of the arguments that there's 824 megawatts of power available is not really the case. In reality, it's somewhere between, I think it's 570 and 600 that will be readily available for use.
Okay, so based on that, next time the minister calls in, I'd like him to explain how he's going to replace Holyrood, supply the mines with the 500 to 1,000 megawatts the other minister suggested yesterday, and send 250 megawatts to Nova Scotia. I have to hear the math on that.
All right. We will pose that question when we get an opportunity. But, my understanding, you see, is that, and again, this is just me, my speculation, and my understanding of things. The mining piece in Labrador, that longer-term downstream demand for energy for mining in Labrador was never legitimately a part of the primary motivator for building Muskrat Falls. In defense of those who support the project, this was because we were going to have rolling blackouts across Newfoundland.
If you consider, Randy, that those mining developments, all the mining companies up, I can name them off, but there's quite a few. There's about 10 developments I'm going to go there now. If you consider that those developments, many of them have been in developing since at least for 5 years, that the powers to be knew that those mines were being developed and that they would need power. I mean, that's just common sense, right?
Yeah, so but they need power. Yeah, but my understanding, the demand for power from the ongoing development in the mining industry is not coming online at the very same time that there's an excessive demand, supposedly, for power on the island of Newfoundland. Like going back to the original announcements and everything that went on, quoting Minister Kennedy and everyone that went on, we're running into a circumstance in Newfoundland where the demand for power is going to outstrip our ability to produce. So we have to come up with a new mechanism to provide power to take care of that. I mean, that's the driving reason. But isn't that the primary driver for building Muskrat Falls?
No, there's no. We're down in island of Newfoundland, Randy. It's down to 1992.
No, I know that. I know that. I'm not arguing that this is my argument. What I'm saying to you is, you can never argue your point effectively unless you fully understand the argument of the other side. And the argument, and you have to be able to argue it like Satan can read Scripture. Right? And the argument for the other side, that was the primary argument on the other side of your argument, was it not?
Apparently.
Well, I mean, if that's
the growth that they're talking about, that they're referring to, is not with Newfoundland. It's in Labrador, and Minister Kenny's referred to that in the House of Assembly several times already. He said, if your natural gas is no good because we need how are you going to power the mines in Labrador? I mean, those are his words in the House of Assembly.
All right. We got to end it there. I got to go to break. I'm over time. Brad Cabana, always a pleasure.
Take care.
We'll talk again. Take care. Bye-bye.